brother said that he saw a ghost as a kid, but a couple years later, I found out what he really saw. So I was about 7 years old while my brother was about 10. It was well past our bedtime when my mom woke up off the couch to put us to bed. Our dad worked construction out of town back then, so it was just the three of us at the house for weeks at a time. Upstairs and immediately to the right was our parents' bedroom, and going left put you in the middle of the hallway. And taking left down this hallway led to my brother's room. And on the very opposite end was my room, which was also across the hall from the upstairs bathroom. And at either end of the hallway are window doors that we always kept locked and rarely used. The door on my end led to a balcony that overlooked the front yard, and the door on my brother's end opened to the back porch. And both my brother and my mom had a habit of waking up in the middle of the night to go use the restroom. I only knew this because I was a light sleeper. This night, however, my brother stopped on his way to his room and came back towards the bathroom. He said that he's gonna pee before he goes to bed because the last few nights he's been too afraid to walk to the bathroom, and says that he keeps seeing a man wearing stripes at the end of the hallway. I'm not sure if my mom wrote it off as my brother telling ghost stories to try to scare me, or if she was just half asleep and didn't catch it, but she didn't react at all to my brother's confession. I, on the other hand, was completely terrified by this statement. The fear of seeing a ghost like that at the end of the hallway or through the windows is the reason I started running from the stairs to my bedroom at night. We've all been there. Well, years later, when I was about 18, my mom and I were having a conversation in our car about a dog we had for a very short time when I was little. We were sharing stories about Max's tendency to destroy shoes and other unruly behaviors whenever my mom blurted out, "Do you remember that time I opened the front door for the cops and Max ran inside to the kitchen and started tearing open that big bag of dog food we had?" This really caught me by surprise because in all the years that I'd lived in that house, we had never once called the cops. I asked her what she was talking about and she looked at me surprised as if I had just revealed something by accident. She goes, "Oh, that's right. I never told you because you were too young at the time." One night I woke up because I was hearing noises outside my window, and when I looked, I saw a man staring into my bedroom. She went on to describe how turning on the lights caused him to take off running and how she grabbed my dad's pistol before calling the cops. She said, "I can't remember all the details they gave when they showed up. Tall white male, wearing a striped shirt and jeans, short dark hair, something like that." They said that it matched the description for a man they were looking for in the area. It turns out he had escaped from jail on a murder charge. Now, I know it sounds so obvious hearing those two stories back to back, but it wasn't until a few years ago in my mid-20s that I pieced everything together, that my brother had unknowingly warned us about a murderer who spent multiple nights casing our home. Damn. Let me know what y'all's thoughts are in the comments. Just imagine a group of nuns plotting your murder. Yorktown Memorial Hospital is plagued with a dark history and even more terrifying present. I don't even really know where to start on this one, so let's just go ahead and get into some of the backstory. So for those of you who don't know, the Yorktown Memorial Hospital is located about 80 miles outside of San Antonio in Yorktown, Texas. It was opened in the 1950s by the Felician Sisters of the Roman Catholic Church. The hospital opened its door in 1951 and stayed in service until 1986. And it reopened a few years later as a drug and alcohol rehab center, but then later closed its doors for good. But hauntingly, during its time of operation, over 2,000 people died within the facility. And while that might not seem like a lot for a large-scale hospital, this place is only 30,000 square feet. It was small. It has two wings, a pediatrics and an adults, and it's centered in the middle with a church. And this place seemed to have more medical mishaps and horror stories than anything else. One particular doctor, Dr. 𝘃𝗶𝗲𝗃𝗃, was one of the main medical professionals in the building, and he began to have a reputation for his mistakes that he would make while operating. One time accidentally slitting the throat of a patient while operating on his thyroid, and it's unclear how something like that might happen accidentally. He would perform electric shock therapy and was rumored to do this without the consent of the patients. And the nuns who lived there had very strict rules, but it seemed as though the rules didn't quite apply to them. Two of the nuns were actually messing around with the priest who worked there and ended up getting pregnant by him. And you'll never believe what they did after they found out someone was going to take this information public. So a whistleblower by the name of Mr. Williams ended up finding out about the nuns getting pregnant at the hospital. And he decided to take things into his own hands. So the priest and the two nuns decided to find him after work, murder him, cut up his body, and then cremate him in the broiler room within the hospital, just down in the basement. And you might be thinking, well, that's pretty bad, but at least it can't get worse than that. No, it gets worse. One of the workers who was there ended up getting involved with one of the patients, and she was cheating on her husband. Her husband found out about this and came to confront both of them at work whenever he found them both making out down in the basement. In a fit of rage, he ended up murdering his wife, and in return, the lover ended up grabbing the weapon away from him and murdering her husband. And so much more happened inside this building. Yorktown Memorial Hospital has become known as one of the most haunted hospitals in the US, and it appears that the spirits of the thousands who have died there are still lurking in the corridors. These spirits include everything from a patient of a little girl all the way to a violent nun. I honestly picture the nun from The Conjuring, and I guess she attacks people who are tatted.
Storytime about my extremely creepy neighbors. So a little background information, I was 12 years old and I was in 6th grade, and my family and I lived in a really small town where everyone knew everyone. But our new neighbors had been building their house next to us for the past 4 years. And finally when they were done with the house, this house was huge. I mean, probably because there were like 8 people moving into the house. There was the mom, the dad, 4 kids, and their grandparents. So like 8 people. But I was super excited because I was like, okay, this is awesome. I get to meet some new friends. But after 2 weeks of not seeing anybody playing in the backyard or anybody on the school bus, I started to think that their family was super fucking weird. And everyone in our neighborhood liked to gossip, and everyone was saying how they barely see the people who had just moved in. So my mom decided to take one for the team and make some brownies, take them over to the house, and I ended up going with her. So we go up to the house, we knock on the door, and one of the kids came and opened the door, but the dad ran over and grabbed him. So like I said, my mom and I took some brownies over there, and one of the kids opened the door, and when he opened the door, he had a bunch of bruises all over his body. The dad came running over and ripped his son from the door and slammed the door in our faces, and all you could hear was him screaming at his son. So my mom and I went to walk away before the door opened, and he was like, sorry, my son knows better than to open the door to strangers. He took the brownies, and then I asked him if I could have a sleepover with one of his daughters, and he was super hesitant at first, but he said that I could only have a sleepover with her if it was at my house and not theirs, which my mom was completely fine with anyways, because she thought that it was a little bit weird that his son had bruises covering his whole body. So that night when she came over to sleep over my house, I asked her how her brother got all those bruises all over his body, and she said that he just fell down some stairs. But after that, we became best friends, and we would literally hang out like 5 times a week until the one day I knocked on their door to ask if she wanted to come over, and her dad answered the door and said that she was gone. When I asked when she would be back, he was like, she went to go live with her mom, so probably never. Which was super weird because she never mentioned that she had another mom. So fast forward 2 months, my family and I are sitting around the fire pit when we hear someone scream help. But we weren't sure if that's what we were actually hearing because it was so quiet, and then all of a sudden we heard someone banging on my neighbor's basement door. You know those metal doors that people usually have outside of their house that lead down basement steps? Yeah, well that's where the banging was coming from. So my dad hopped over the fence to see if that's where the screaming was coming from also. And then not even a minute later, my dad hopped back over the fence and it looked like he saw a ghost, but he ran inside, called 911. Because I was so young, the only thing my parents told me about that whole situation was that the girl that I was friends with was still alive and her parents were keeping her in the basement along with 2 of her other siblings. But then we also found out that they weren't even her real parents. They were kidnapped at the hospital when they were born.